Hello students, this is Effective Technical Communication. Today's topic is intercultural communication. Now, what is the importance of intercultural communication? So, as we all know that today's world is a world of communication. There is lots and lots of communication which is happening in today's world. And particularly, we have also talked about a lot of communication happening on the internet through the social media. So because of this social media, we are able to communicate globally. Not only that, but because the markets have opened over the borders, the businesses also happen globally. So for us to learn communication in the organization, it is also very important to learn intercultural communication, particularly for people who work in an environment where they have clients from outside of the country, or they may also have some offices which may be outside of the country. They may have some branches in the other countries. So for our business purposes, we may have to interact with people outside the country, and for that purpose we need to learn the culture of that country. As the businesses these days happen across borders, people in organizations, they are into such situations where they have to communicate with other people from different countries. Now, when we talk about different countries, then definitely we understand one thing, and that is different culture. Now, first of all, what is the meaning of culture? So, as we may think that culture will bring in our minds things like things which are related to, first of all, the language, then maybe the way people dress up, then their festivals, then their art, different things which prominently show the difference in the culture. The culture difference does not limit only to this. Culture difference has many deeper aspects. For example, the way people talk, it is also guided by culture. Or you may say the way people deal with others, or the way people things like respecting the elders, or things like how do we behave with the neighbors, or things like how much strong there is a feeling of community, or how much of the individualism is there. All these are also the factors of a culture, because ultimately culture means the way of living. As the way of living differs, the way of communication also differs, because communication depends a lot on the culture. The way the people live, it guides the way a person communicates. So what is the meaning of intercultural communication? So intercultural communication can be defined as interaction between members of different groups. Now, why they are different? They differ from each other just because of the knowledge they share with each other, the kind of information they share with each other, and they become a different group, and a different group has a different culture. When we talk about cultural variations, these cultural variations are not only of language, but they are also many different things. The way people communicate also differs. It is not only about the language. For example, when we say that if a person has to go to Germany, the person will have to learn German. True, because that particular language you have to learn, the local language you have to learn where you have to work, because to communicate the language is required. But what we miss out over here is that apart from language, there are so many different factors which affects when we have to communicate with other culture people. It is very important to understand that why these cultural variations affect the communication. It affects the communication because the intended message or the intended meaning of a message differs when it is encoded by a person from a certain culture and then it is decoded by some other person from other culture. Why? Because the way they relate to words and the way they relate to the non-verbal cues or the symbols are different for different culture. In India, we believe in community living. So we believe in closed groups. We always are in closed groups. To take an example of countries like USA or any other countries, where individualism is given more importance as compared to community, then the way of communicating differs. Let me give you an example. We stay in a closed group and we give importance and we have very good relations with our neighbors. So we have a particular way of talking with people. Sometimes we also, talk in such a manner that we feel that, we have obligation with each other to fulfill each other's needs. But in the USA, they don't think that way. They don't feel that they have obligation to fulfill each other's needs. So that is why they say a lot of thank you to each other. They always feel that if some other person does something for them, it is something which is extra and they always say thank you. And in our culture, if a friend tells us thank you, then we will say that, we have a very famous quote that no sorry and no thank you in friendship. But in the other cultures, that is not the case. So again, suppose you are talking to someone who is not from India and you don't tend to thank them quite often, then people will start feeling very strange about you. They will build a perception about you and they will not understand if they don't understand our culture. So it is very important. They should understand that this is our culture and that is why we behave in a certain manner. And because of that behavior, we also communicate in a certain manner. So we don't feel the need of telling thank you all the time. And we don't feel the need of telling thank you to everyone. We may say thank you to maybe some strangers or in the organizations to our colleagues or someone, but in the families and with the relatives or sometimes even with the neighbors, we may not say a thank you. So this is a very strikingly opposite thing of two different cultures. Again, gestures have different meanings in different cultures. So in different cultures, there are some different ways of gestures. For example, in India, we have a particular, body movement, or we can also call it as a gesture, where we may do like this. We may just turn our head like this, when we want to show some kind of obedience, or when we agree, we just tilt it a little on a side. But that gesture is not used in some countries like the USA. They don't use this gesture and they find it very, very modest gesture. They feel that this is a very new gesture, a different gesture. They either say a yes or a no. So again, there is a lot of difference, and sometimes they may not even understand that particular gesture. Sometimes we only nod it like this. That means we are just giving our agreement, and they may think that we are not sure about it because we are just tilting our head. So again, there is a difference of the gesture over here. So there are so many intercultural variations. Now, if we talk about people coming from different places within the country, again there is a lot of cultural variation. You may have observed, that many people from other states, they migrate over here and they stay in this state, and their way of communication is completely different because their way of thinking is completely different. They have grown up in completely different environment. They talk in a certain manner to a certain person, and they talk in a certain different manner as compared to you. So even within the country, you will find a lot of cultural variations. Okay, now again, let us come to a very micro level of cultural variation. You may live in the same state. For example, you stay in Gujarat, so you may live in the same state, but even different cities have different culture. So let me give you an example. You may say that people in Ahmedabad believe a lot of people in Ahmedabad believe in having a lot of fun. They believe in earning a lot of money and then spending it during their weekends. So that is the culture of Ahmedabad. That may not be the culture of some other city, for example Baroda or some other city. Then we may say that people of Surat, they have there is a culture of eating a lot, eating outside. They are really fond of eating. So again, there is a different culture. So culture, even there is a because of culture, there is a different variation. And then when we come to the language part, then that is very obvious that wherever you go, you have to learn the language of that place. But again, if I talk about just the Gujarat state, then you must have observed that within this state, that within this one state, there are different dialects. People speak in a different manner. So all of them may be speaking Gujarati, but again their way of speaking is different, and sometimes you will not even understand certain words spoken by a person from a different city. So this is how the culture becomes different and the communication between them are different. So that is why the intercultural communication is very, very important. And in the present time, when the businesses are happening, we need to consider the different cities and the states and everything. But at the same time, now because the entire world has become very, very close and the businesses may happen across the borders, you will also have to learn various things about their culture. So starting from the language, the accent, you also have to understand the accent of the other person, because again for one particular language there may be different accents. The Australian accent of English language is different from that of Britain and from that of the USA. So all the three of them have different accents they use. So we have to get, we also have to learn to understand those accents. So you also have to learn the accents, but at the same time you also have to learn the culture, that how they live and what meaning they infer from whatever you say, or what kind of gestures you should not do with people with certain countries, because in some countries certain gestures are counted as positive, while in other countries the same gesture is counted as a negative gesture. So you also have to be aware about all these things. So intercultural communication is very, very important. So so this is all about the dynamics of communication, and here we are ending the first chapter of dynamics of communication. I would like to revise whatever we have studied till now. So we started with the definition of communication, then we talked about the communication process, how the communication process happens. We understood that what is the importance of communication in our lives and in the organization or in the professional life. Then we talked about the different levels of communication. Then we talked about the barriers to communication. We also talked about the interpersonal communication, and then today we talked about the intercultural communication. So till now we have learned the basics of communication, and we have understood that what all things are important as far as communication is concerned. So that's all for today.